Hey guys, welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going to dive right in and totally dismantle those pervasive pseudoscientific myths you've been taught about nonverbal communication. We're replacing all of that with rigorous science. I mean, we see these ideas literally everywhere, right? In airport paperbacks, corporate seminars, even your favorite TV dramas. But the reality of how human beings actually communicate physically is far more fascinating and, frankly, much more complex than what pop psychology suggests.
So, can you actually read a person like a book? Let's challenge this whole cultural belief that there's some kind of universal dictionary of nonverbal cues out there, one that lets us just bypass speech entirely and read the true state of a person's soul. For centuries, people have been searching for a foolproof way to read body language, assuming that while words can be carefully controlled, the body simply cannot lie. But as we're going to see today, the scientific consensus reveals that this dictionary approach is fundamentally flawed.
All right, Section 1, the communication statistic myth. We'll start by deconstructing the absolute bedrock of the body language industry.
You've probably heard of the wildly misunderstood statistic that communication is overwhelmingly nonverbal. It's that famous 55-38-7 formula. This comes from Albert Mehrabian's 1967 studies, which basically claim that 55% of communication is facial expression, 38% is tone of voice, and only a tiny 7% is the actual words spoken. This gets cited constantly. But here is the catch. Those original studies were extremely narrow. They specifically only applied to situations where verbal and nonverbal channels were incongruent. You know, like if someone angrily yelled, "I have no problem with you." In those specific emotional clashes, sure, we trust the nonverbal cues. But applying this 93% rule to a complex negotiation, a medical diagnosis, or a technical lecture, that's completely absurd. Even Mehrabian himself has repeatedly clarified that these findings were never meant to be a blanket rule for all human interaction. We kinda love this myth because it validates our intuition about vibes, but when you're getting directions or signing a contract, verbal content is absolutely paramount.
Moving right along to Section 2, the lie detection fallacy. Let's look at the most fertile ground for body language mythology.
Can you spot a liar? We are so culturally conditioned to believe that the body cannot keep a secret. We think there is always a tell, right? A little twitch, a micro-expression, some nervous habit that gives away the deception. Well, rigorous science paints a starkly different picture.
The data reveals a truly shocking reality. A comprehensive meta-analysis of over 200 studies involving thousands of judges shows that the average human lie detection accuracy is barely 54%. That is practically the exact same odds as just flipping a coin. And you know what's even crazier? Experts like police officers, judges, and customs officials, they don't perform significantly better than average laypeople. The only real difference is that the experts are just way more confident in their incorrect judgments.
Let's break down some of these specific myths. Things like touching your nose or averting your gaze. That doesn't mean someone is lying. The whole Pinocchio effect assumes lying causes stress, which makes your nose itch. But hey, innocent people feel massive stress too. Plus, practiced liars actually suppress their movements. And what about eye contact? Liars actually know the stereotype, so they often deliberately maintain prolonged eye contact to prove their sincerity. It's wildly ironic. Also, that old neurolinguistic programming idea, the one that says looking up and to the right means you're fabricating a lie, that has been comprehensively debunked by modern research. It simply doesn't hold up.
Which brings us to Section 3, the tragic Othello Error. This is where we see the devastating real-world consequences of these myths. Named after Shakespeare's tragic protagonist, the Othello Error happens when an investigator assumes signs of stress automatically equate to deception. This error is a primary driver of wrongful convictions and false confessions in high-stakes interrogations. Why? Because an innocent suspect's immense fear of a false accusation looks exactly like a guilty suspect's fear of getting caught. They tremble, they sweat, their vocal pitch goes up. If you read that stress as a confession of guilt, you're literally letting a myth overwrite evidence.
All right, Section 4, decoding postures and smiles. Since we've torn down what body language isn't, let's rebuild our understanding.
Take crossed arms, for example. In almost every pop psychology book out there, crossed arms are labeled as defensive or closed off. But actually, scratch that. They serve so many alternative functions. A lot of times, they're just a mechanism for self-soothing in anxious situations. It's literally providing a proprioceptive hug that lowers your cortisol levels. Or they might indicate intense cognitive engagement. You're restricting motor movement to channel your brain's resources into deep thinking. Or, maybe the person is just cold. To avoid getting this completely wrong, we have to read gestures in clusters, kind of like how we read words in a sentence. Focusing on just one single gesture strips it of its crucial syntax. Crossed arms paired with a tight jaw and clenched fists? Okay, yeah, that might be a defensive cluster. But crossed arms paired with a hand on the chin and eyes looking away? That's a thinking cluster. You have to look at the whole body language sentence to actually understand the meaning.
We also see this incredible nuance when it comes to smiles. A genuine Duchenne smile engages the orbicularis oculi muscles around your eyes. Those are the ones that give you crow's feet, and they are incredibly difficult to fake voluntarily. On the flip side, the non-Duchenne or Pan Am smile only uses the mouth muscles. It's often used as just a polite social mask. And here's a fascinating bonus fact. Liars even use it to exhibit what researchers call duping delight. That's a fleeting, totally inappropriate smile they get when they think they are successfully deceiving you.
Next up, Section 5, Culture and Neurodiversity. Let's widen the lens a bit.
Standard behavioral baselines completely fail when we introduce cultural variations. Assuming a hand gesture has a universal meaning, that can lead to catastrophic misunderstandings. Emblems are entirely culturally constructed. For instance, the OK sign means perfect in the US, but take that exact same gesture to Brazil, and well, it's a severe obscenity. Talk about an awkward vacation moment. In Japan, it means money, and in France, it can mean worthless. Did you know that even nodding your head up and down means no in some parts of Greece and Turkey?
And this kind of misinterpretation extends deeply into neurodivergent populations too. This leads to what researchers call the double empathy problem. It's a mutual failure where two different neurotypes simply misunderstand each other's signaling systems. Most of the good body language baselines taught in corporate settings inherently discriminate against neurodivergent individuals.
Normal ADHD and autistic behaviors are frequently penalized just because they contradict neurotypical models. Gaze aversion for an autistic person often prevents sensory overload so they can actually listen better. It is not shifty deception. Fidgeting or stimming, that's vital for self-regulation and maintaining baseline cortical arousal for someone with ADHD. It's not a sign of guilt or squirming. When we don't account for these baselines, we get terrible false positive rates in lie detection and fundamentally misjudge people's intentions in high-stakes situations like job interviews.
Finally, Section 6, the science of mirroring. Let's conclude on a highly positive pro-social note.
Rather than being a manipulative tool to exploit or read someone, our nonverbal communication often relies on the chameleon effect. This is mirroring, where we subconsciously build empathy and affiliation. Think about it. When you hang out with your friends, you probably don't even realize you're adopting their posture or echoing their facial expressions.
This step-by-step biological process is absolutely vital. You unconsciously observe, you subtly mimic, and doing so activates mirror neurons in your brain. This establishes profound feelings of trust, similarity, and rapport. It's crucial in infant development for building self-concept, and it's just as essential in adult relationships. It proves that our bodies are deeply wired to connect with one another, not simply to deceive.
Which leaves us with a provocative final question to ponder. The next time you think you've instantly figured someone out just by how they're sitting, are you really reading them, or are you just projecting your own cultural biases and assumptions onto them?
So, the absolutely crucial takeaway from this explainer is that you must always view behavior through the lens of context, culture, and science. There's no magic dictionary, but by understanding the real science of how we move and interact, we can communicate with far more empathy and accuracy. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe.